to a better world. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We are seated with the author of this book, The Forgotten Language of Children, by Lillian Firestone. Lillian has been part of what is known as the Gurdjieff work. You've heard me make reference to Gurdjieff countless times over the course of years. He's one of my teachers, mentors, and has had a tremendous influence on my life, and actually so has Lillian. Lillian has been the facilitator and leader of a group that I've been in over the course of years, actually many of them years ago. But the teaching of Mr. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff continues to live in me and in my bones, really, have touched my essence. And as a result, I wanted to have Lillian on the show to talk about this book because she, for way, way longer than me and most people, have been very deeply connected and part of this very precious work, which is becoming more relevant as time goes on. And he's one of those mystics at the turn of, well, the last century, who has exerted a very powerful influence, oftentimes behind the scenes, on our global lives. And I'm all the happier to have Lillian on, who is a spokesperson in many ways for the work, and particularly for her work with children, which she was, in a sense, now that we look back, spearheading in New York, in the United States, going back many years, and has raised her own children inside the work, and they've turned out to be utterly magnificent, wonderful, and society-contributing people. So it's really a real pleasure to have Lillian on. I'm excited about introducing her to you and learning about the kinds of things that help to create a better world. Hello, Lillian.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you on. So, what inspired the book?
When I met the Gurdjieff work, I was a single mother with a young child, a little 2-year-old daughter, and I had a horror.
Risa, I take that to be.
I had a horror.
I know the whole family, of course.
that I would raise her with all the same stupid mistakes that I had been raised.
Oh.
And I thought, is there any way to escape?
Every parent's fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way to escape from the dead hand of habit? So, fortunately, I met the Gurdjieff work, and there was an experiment ongoing of how to bring a spiritual teaching to children without indoctrinating them. So I was accepted in this study with my little daughter, and we began what turned out to be a lifelong study for me of how to bring up children to be courageous, to be in touch with their essence, to have common sense, to have their feet firmly planted in this earth, and at the same time to still have their idealism and to still have their spiritual search if they have one, if they are born with one.
Mm-hmm. So are these ideas that you would say are not in circulation as you were raising Risa and then later Mark in the general populace of parental influence?
Well, society today, as you know, is very organized to develop children's intellect. Everything is aimed at that. Now they're even talking about it in kindergarten, even in pre-kindergarten, teaching kids to read and developing their minds. But Mr. Gurdjieff understood that for a long time it was a child's emotions and his spirit that developed. Until about the age of 7, it was premature to introduce ideas and intellectual stuffing.
Yes, stuffing.
And then,
yes, stuffing.
And then even after the age of 7, how to keep essence alive.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke of essence. And, to condense a life of search into a few words, I'd say what we discovered that children need more than anything is a challenge. Something interesting that they
along with love, I take it.
Along with love, along with support, along with attention.
Mm-hmm.
Something that makes them stretch in order to grow.
Yeah.
And support is absolutely crucial, because if you offer a child a challenge, You have to support him or her, whether he succeeds at the challenge or doesn't, whether he does well or poorly. It's the quality of his effort that we were looking to support, not the result. Efforts, not results. Efforts,
What
not results.
a radical difference
Yeah.
than in the world at large.
Yeah.
Because
Where
that
only results count.
exactly that pre-kindergarten and nursery school training. I know my college roommate is in that world with his daughter. They are actually intellectually training their children at those precious young ages for Ivy League school. And they're already thinking that far in advance.
Well, if you want a well-functioning automaton, that's a good thing. If you want a human being with conscience and with essence, maybe not so good.
Yes. What you're kind of suggesting, Lillian, is that that's a very one-brained kind of development.
Yeah.
And in Gurdjieff's work, he speaks about three-brained, harmonious developments from the mind, the intellect, the emotional feeling life, and the physical body.
And the body, yeah.
So you bring all those into harmony, into unison, then you're talking about a real
real person.
Right.
My daughter Risa wrote, by the way, this book is full of stories by the children themselves, full of their accounts. And she wrote a little paragraph that said, what was different at the foundation of the children's work was only our trying mattered. What the results were, nobody cared. What people wanted to see is that we tried for ourselves. And she said this was the opposite of ordinary life, where only the results mattered, and nobody cared what your experience or what your effort was.
Oh, God.
So that's a nice little summary of the difference.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like you're focusing on the inner life of the child, what he or she is thinking, feeling, attempting, intending.
Exactly.
That whole most rich area is really utterly ignored. And there's a linear, thin line of connecting point A to B, or Z, as the case may be. Yeah.
And, you know, how we raise our children very often, our criticism and our demands lower them, don't raise them. People believe...
Say more about this is important for people to hear.
People believe that if you criticize a child, you encourage him or her to do better. But in fact, it's the opposite. Criticism makes children want to not try. It makes them feel defeated. So what the parent has to watch and what the child needs is encouragement for effort and not praise for the results. If a child tries their best and produces a mediocre result, that has to be supported and praised more than if a child carelessly throws off a masterpiece that didn't cost him anything. So encouraging, so that's one important aspect. Another important aspect from my point of view was that we tried to model for children that external circumstances were more or less neutral, and everything depended on their attitude. That hardship wasn't hardship, luxury wasn't luxury, everything depended on our relation to it. And so we did a lot of interesting things together. We took trips, we climbed mountains, we hiked the Appalachian Trail.
You tell one story in here that is someone wanted to go to the store. It was like a field trip to a store, like a weekend at Ormonk or wherever, and she wanted to buy just cans of food. And you wanted to get the fresh produce because she was the child. She had
about 13.
And so you conceded to that. And the bags ended up to be so heavy on a hot summer's day back a few miles that they gave up. How do you handle that situation?
Well,
so on one hand, that's respecting the child's decision, and yet getting stuck with the results yourself.
Well, that's what.
How do you manage that?
Well, that's what we had to accept. That if we were going to support the children, we had to accept the burden of what might come and be prepared to accept the consequences. And the children didn't always choose rightly. Were we always going to interfere like well-meaning parents do and make sure they made the right choice? Or would we let them choose, perhaps make a mistake, learn something from it, and support them?
Yes.
So it brought the adults many moments of hardship.
Got it. What do you do in a case, Lillian? Because what you did in the work and with the children there, of course, is a bit of a microcosm, or certainly something that can be generally applied to education, to parents raising their children, and there's so much, I think, for people at large to learn about what you all did in these studies. What do you do with a child who is sort of on a bit of a rampage or breaking things, or, you know, the whole iron, touching the iron kind of phenomenon? How, from the Gurdjieffian point of view, would you manage that kind of matter?
Well, going back a step from the Gurdjieffian point of view, the most important thing is the relationship to the child. It's not the event, it's the relationship. And if you protect the relationship, it shows you so clearly what's needed in that situation. One could never mentally decide how things were going to go, how things were going to turn out, unless you were prepared to impose your vision. But if you were truly going to let the child choose, you had to be prepared for any eventuality. And sometimes it meant that it fell more heavily on you than you expected. Like I ended up carrying more of those cans than I ever thought I would. You know, praying and counting and doing all kinds of exercises just to get back to camp.
We only have 3 more miles.
But the thing about the relationship is the child wants to feel related. And if the child feels related, he or she instinctively wants to maintain that relationship. They want to please you. They want to keep the relationship
On the
going.
healthy side of pleasing.
Yeah. And if there's no relationship, the child feels abandoned, and he or she will do anything, maybe to get the attention that they're lacking.
Yes.
And somebody asked me, a parent asked me, what do the children need from us? And that's a very good question. And I said, well, what kind of adult do you want to raise? Who do you want your child to be when he or she grows up? Because based on that, you know how to act.
Exactly. So from that point of view, you've raised, you know, a small bevy of children.
Yes, I have. Yes,
Risa, Chris, Mark.
Right, and many others.
And many others, right? But from more or less your own loins. I mean, I've known them all since they were almost children, almost. And what do you have in mind as a mother? And talk a little bit about the results that you have seen.
Well, I had in mind to give them the respect that I myself never had as a child and from which I suffered so terribly. And that respect meant that I allowed initiative to come from the child, which is what Mr. Gurdjieff spoke of so much.
Yes.
In other words, if the child said, I want to paint, or I want to draw, or I want to repair a car, to support that instead of saying, no, painting is stupid, you can't make a living at it, you better study accounting. And that's how laziness begins. If a child can't follow what they love, but is forced to do something through somebody else's imposition, they become what we call lazy, which is really a resistance. But when a child is doing something
because basically they're not following their own heart and instinct.
Exactly. There's no laziness. One of my grandchildren was staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning decorating a cake. She wouldn't hear of going to sleep because she wanted that cake to be perfect. And it was. It looked like something that would come from a very high-class bakery. But the hour and the fatigue didn't bother her. And the same way when Mark was in high school, I used to beg him 2, 3 in the morning to go to sleep. No, he was practicing his debating. And until
that's right. He became quite a debater, right?
He became a good debater. And until he got it right, he wouldn't go to sleep. But subjects that didn't interest him didn't get his attention. And I try to, well, to support them in their desire
Yes.
in the various directions that it took.
Mm-hmm.
So each one of them was so different, but they all received the same support.
And they were each formally in the work with you.
Well, to a degree, maybe some
In and
for a
out.
couple of years or
Here and there,
yeah.
yes. But they had that exposure, and then they chose whether it was something they wanted to continue.
Right.
And yeah.
But what really brought them the exposure was the attitude that I tried to bring into the home, based on the principles of respecting the child, encouraging the being of the child, of relating to the essence of the child.
I know I bore witness to this because I've been in your family household so many times over the years. And, you know, as the Chinese say, the greatest change starts at home and with the first step.
Yes.
And the home is the first step. So, you know, I got to see you in action.
Yeah.
And it was always impressive to see the attitude that you expressed toward each of them. I mean, Risa was already grown up by then, but the other two more so. And Risa became a psychiatrist. She ended up going to, was it Radcliffe? And
She went to
Barnard?
Harvard, and then she went to Columbia Medical School, and
Right.
then she did her psychiatric training at Cornell, Weill Cornell, and with really very good people. And she's a gifted child and teenage psychiatrist. And she uses the Gurdjieff techniques as second nature.
Yeah.
She respects the children, she listens to the children, and she gets amazing results from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, she told me about one case. I said, well, why did so-and-so get better? And she said, I think he wanted to get better because he wanted to please me and I wanted him well.
That's good enough. That's good enough.
Relationship.
Relationship,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Please thy father and mother and everybody else near them. I think that's that commandment, isn't it? Something like that. And Chris, I haven't heard about Chris. Chris was actually on this show many moons ago, involved with the men's work that he was doing.
Good.
I just remembered.
Good. Well, Chris has been tireless in seeking to repair the wounds of his particular childhood. Absolutely tireless. He's done therapy, he's done men's work, he hasn't been idle. And in the meantime, he's been so productive writing plays. Every year or two, there's another play. It's on Broadway. His heart
On
has
Broadway?
off.
Off,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
But his heart has been in Hollywood,
Fabulous.
and he moved out to LA recently, and he's just sold 2 major scripts to Paramount. Not one, but 2, for 2 major movies, one about Vikings and one about Julius Caesar.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you saw his play about Julius Caesar, 23 Knives.
No.
Delightful.
Really?
Off Broadway. His take on who killed Julius Caesar, a new theory.
Oh, God. That's interesting. Also, if he's working on his relationship with his father through this, you know. Anyway, I mean, it's interesting,
Exactly.
right? It's interesting.
So,
in fact, Bill, his father, was also on briefly talking about the men's work they were both engaged in at the time, and it was really very powerful to see. I think men's work in general is just fabulous for so many, and to see father and son, both of whom I've known for most of my life, was you know, especially precious. You know,
I think Bill I mean, who am I to judge? But I think he made major strides in his understanding through the men's work.
Yeah.
Really major.
Excellent.
And towards the end, he was not the same man that he had been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Beautiful. Well, it sounds like you have 2 sons who are involved in Hollywood, and Mark has been also exceptional in his accomplishments through tell us a little bit about Mark and what he's been up to, which is your youngest. This is an expression of what this work how it has affected some children, particularly yours.
Mark wanted, after he graduated from college, to be an investigative reporter. And I advised him that newspapers were closing, it was a dying industry. And he said, nevertheless, that's what he wanted to do.
I want to write.
Yeah, no, he wants to investigate.
Investigate, okay.
And bring out the truth and expose the bad guys. So he eventually had a very successful career as an investigative reporter, writing stories for Rolling Stone and Playboy
Village
and
Voice.
Mother Jones and
Right.
all of those.
Yeah.
Village Voice. And then he said he wanted to make movies because that's how people are really touched and influenced these days.
Yes.
So he went out to Hollywood and sold one of his stories to Paul Haggis, who made a film of it called The Valley of Elah. But Mark was very unhappy because Haggis changed his story quite a bit, and Mark saw that he had no control over his own material. So he said, Mom, I'm going to make my own movie. And I said, absolutely. That's you should do that.
Of course.
So there he was. He went to every studio in Hollywood, and they all turned him down, 100%. But that's our principle. You know, you don't quit, and you do the hard thing.
Yeah.
So he finally found a backer in Europe, Frenchman, who gave him a few groschen, you know, a very small amount of money. I think something like $11 million. And on
Everything is relative, but from filmmaking, yes, that's on the small side, of course.
On that, he shot a major motion picture with, you know, tanks and guns, and that became The Hurt Locker.
Oh, God, that was it.
And
Yes.
again, getting distribution was very difficult. Nobody understood the picture. And finally,
So
Summit...
he put all that together. He put together the funding. And,
yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And then Summit Entertainment only bought the movie because there were a lot of explosions in it. And
Is it either explosions or sex or both?
exactly. So then, thanks to the media, thanks to journalists, the movie was widely acclaimed. And his total advertising budget was something like $75,000. I mean, he had no money, he had no distribution, but the editors liked it, the reporters liked it, they saw it, and they recognized something of value.
Yes.
So they wrote about it, and he won 2 Academy Awards with that.
2.
So now his
fabulous.
future in filmmaking is different now. He doesn't have to.
Right, exactly.
Fight that
Now
battle.
they're coming to him instead.
Yeah.
God bless him. God bless him. So bring your children to the Gurdjieff work. If you would, read this passage. Thank you for sharing what the results have been, even though the emphasis has always been on process. It's interesting when you focus, all the Tibetan teachers and everyone else, all the great masters really say, focus on the moment,
Right.
on process,
Right.
instead of the end, and the end will be rich, whatever that you may have in mind or whatever it may be.
Well,
So-
this is not representative in that this is a story about an exercise. We used to give the children, the older ones, certain exercises that we hoped would bring them more to the moment. And Chris was about 16 when he had this exercise, and he wrote this account, which for a 16-year-old boy I think is telling.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving the farm in Oregon, Peggy gave me a task. You must record in your mind everything you see and do today, she specified, down to the last detail. And you must remember and tell it back to us tonight when we camp. I chose to take this task very seriously. At midday, as we were driving south, I was still fervently trying to record everything I said and did. Then for about 20 minutes, the entire world changed. It started with the trees. I was looking at them whizzing by when suddenly I noticed them. I had been watching them for the better part of an hour, and all of a sudden, there they were. They were green and brown and, well, incredible. As they flew by, I saw colors in them I had never before imagined were in pine trees, and all different shades of green and blue and gold. It was as if they had been painted in some magical way to make them glow. Then I noticed the dashboard, that ugly brown Dodge dashboard I had been made to stare at all morning. It suddenly was vibrating with color and energy. I reached out to touch it, and my hands were equally interesting. Then we stopped for lunch in a small park. I had absolutely no interest in eating. Rather, I went straight to a nearby garden and waded into the flowers, seeing and smelling them as if for the first time in my life.
Ooh.
So there can be that kind of
Getting into the
transcendent
flow.
moment.
Yeah.
A transcendent
Exactly.
moment
16.
from the applying of the attention very exactly to what I'm saying and doing, to the moment. This is a method, I think, that you find in all spiritual teachings.
Yes. Indeed.
So we brought that to the children without doctrine, without doctrination.
We didn't talk explicitly much about the work of Gurdjieff, but we talked about it implicitly and the way it kind of showed up in children in general with whom you've worked, as well as in your own family, which is so important. And it's a beautiful gift that you've given us with this book.
Thank you.
And what your life has been as an expression of this work and this teaching.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
I'm personally thankful too, Lillian, because of all the years I've had of the pleasure of knowing you and your family, and it's been a real gift.
Amazon.
Amazon.com. We'll put all of that down. So, thanks so much for being with us, and I wish you tremendous luck with the book.
Thank you.
This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Get in touch with us at www.abetterworld.net. Become part of the A Better World community, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.